If you've been a Sonic fan for a while, you'd probably know there's like 3 games widely considered the worst games in the franchise. If you remove Sonic Boom because it's not in our traditional Sonic timeline, you are then left with 2, Sonic 06 and Sonic Forces.
I want to see which of these 2 fan favorites sucks the worst.
Chaos.
Oh my god, not like that! I grabbed both of these games extremely close to launch, with Sonic 06 being one of the first titles I owned on my PS3. I also grabbed Sonic Forces basically on the day it came out, and beat it before I had to go to sleep for school the next day.
I remember not thinking much of Sonic Forces, but I never replayed it. I didn't hate it from what I recall, but I remember breathing a sigh of relief that the game wasn't as buggy and broken as 06. I replayed Sonic 06 like 3 years ago, so it's not super fresh for me either. Over time, I began to dislike Forces, which was probably only natural. As it currently stands, I dislike Forces a little less than 06, but that opinion is based off the sense of relief I felt for Sonic after Sonic Boom was the travesty that it was. However, due to Sonic Project 06, Sonic 06 as a whole has been relevant again. Combine that with the rumors of a remake, and you've got people coming out of the woodwork left, right, and center to defend this game nowadays. So let me make one thing perfectly clear. Sonic Project 06 will not be looked at in this video. Not because I don't like it, but because we are looking at what Sega gave us and not what fans fixed up. If I was talking about P06, this video would be so short.
What's up guys, today we're talking about, is Project 06 better than Sonic Forces? Is a video game better than a gunshot wound?
So after playing Sonic Forces is somehow worse than I remember, but better than I've been told. Listen, it's not an affront to God, but it is a horribly bland at best and downright bad at worst Sonic game. Sonic Forces is a war arc story, which sounds cool, especially if you watch anime. Or, in my case, you exclusively watch Naruto, but have your anime watching friends explain how that's common in shonen anime. Anyway, the game is as follows. Eggman decides he's had enough of Sonic for the last time, for the 690th time, and launches an attack against this random town. Sonic pulls up after running through all 90 seconds of Green Hill Zone to rendezvous with Tails, but gets jumped by some of his old adversaries for his Jordans until they realize they're Pumas and decide to kidnap him instead. Seriously though, Sonic gets his ass beat by Metal Sonic, Chaos, Zavok, and Shadow, and this new schmuck, Infinite. It was actually really cathartic to watch Sonic get smacked around. I hope he gets closer to death more often. Sonic is then taken, allowing Eggman to take over the rest of the world with his army. We then get a cutscene of Sonic's homies talking about Sonic getting his face kicked in while mentioning Tails as, lost it. Sidebar, why the absolute hell is Silver here? Okay, so I did some digging. Silver was introduced in Sonic 06, Sonic 06 was erased from the canon, and then 06 was made canon again in Generations. Silver came back from the future to warn Knuckles as explained by a prequel comic, but why would Silver from the future know them? We stopped the events of 06 from ever happening, meaning Silver would never come back in time, but that in itself is a paradox. Whatever. Silver is here and you will like it. I am actually happy to see him, although I swear he's cursed. Knuckles then walks in with your sorry ass looking custom character. If you aren't familiar, you can create your very own custom avatar that plays in his own stages. Sega finally decided to tap into that Sonic OC community. Anyway, say hello to Foreskin the bear. That's Foreskin with the number 4, thank you very much. You can't name them in the game, I don't think, which is probably for the best though. Knuckles then hands you a Wispin and sends you out to war. Anyway, time for our first avatar level. Yeah, screw the avatar, man. The avatar controls poorly with a really awkward sense of weight when gaining speed and slowing down. You also have this gun-like weapon that has different properties depending on which wisp it's themed after. This allows you to take different routes by using different wisps, which are back again for some fucking reason. Please stop bringing them back! The avatar also has a grappling hook thingy, which essentially just gives him a worse version of the homing attack. It has a stupid delay before you use it, making the avatar just feel even worse to play, but we'll get back to them later. We then get news from Knuckles that Sonic is alive and held captive by Eggman, where they've been torturing him for about 6 months. Listen, I use the word torture here really lightly. Sonic is basically spotless when we see him in the orbiting prison, so I don't understand why they emphasize the torture so much. If anything, Tails is the one acting like he's been tortured. Speaking of Tails, he's back on Earth trying to fix Omega until Chaos comes up behind him, causing him to cower in fear. Are you kidding me? Tails? The same Tails that fought a stronger version of Chaos is cowering in fear? Listen, I don't care if Sonic is dead at this point in the story and Tails is traumatized or whatever. This is not just Tails showing weakness. It's a complete undoing of Tails learning to gain independence, and it's a complete undoing of him learning to be brave without Sonic. Anyway, Classic Sonic then comes out of a portal and bops Chaos on the head. Listen, I love Classic Sonic. He's cute, cool, has some sick games, but why the fuck is he here? He's just here as a marketing ploy, and it couldn't be any more obvious, since he barely appears in the game compared to this monstrosity that I made. I'm done with the plot summary after this, since the story is pretty much non-existent beyond here. Go mess up Eggman's plans, that's all. If you're wondering why Sonic's old foes are here, then it's because of Infinite's Phantom Ruby, which allows him to make whatever he wants appear real to his victims. It's just a way for them to bring back old villains, since Infinite and Eggman barely get creative with it, other than trying to drop the sun on your heads at the end. Whatever part of this game attempted to be a cohesive story is worthless, since the game doesn't even take itself seriously enough. Torture and losing one's mind are pretty serious things, so if you're gonna use these as plot devices, take them seriously. Sonic is cracking jokes and running around after 6 months of supposed torture, which gets mentioned a couple times at first, leading you to believe it's somehow important, and then it gets completely dropped. This is a game written without a serious story that has oddly serious elements of war thrown in the mix, and it just does not work.
You're not really going to get any cool Sonic moments out of this game's story or its cutscenes. They're just really stiff, and there's absolutely no sauce in this game to speak of. Classic Sonic is also just shoehorned in there, so it doesn't really get any cool moments either.
Normally a bland or uninteresting Sonic plot wouldn't be the end of the world, but Sonic Forces constantly stops you from going from stage to stage to make you listen to Sonic's friends drone on about whatever the hell is going on. They constantly speak in stages too, which gets annoying pretty quickly when the script is this bland. This just snaps the pace of the game into pieces, especially when you consider that on your first run through, you have to sit here and deal with all these stupid costume unlocks for the avatar, which only further interrupts the player. There's barely any cutscenes either, they're mostly just static dialogue boxes with voice acting. It's funny though, considering there's barely any game here. Sonic Forces is hilariously short. I beat it in one stream in about 2.5 hours, and that was without skipping anything and screwing up multiple times in stages. You got 4 types of stages here during those 2 hours or so. Modern Sonic levels that are supposed to be your standard boost affair, Avatar levels that are like modern Sonic levels but worse, levels that have you control both modern Sonic and the Avatar, and lastly, classic Sonic levels, with physics so abhorrently off from anything you'd want classic Sonic to control like, you'd almost think they did it on purpose. None of these are any fun, to be honest. Modern Sonic has such bland level design, and what the hell is with the automation in this game? I'm not usually one to complain about automation in a Sonic game, but this game made it extremely apparent I was not in control. There's this snake that would have made a really cool set piece, but instead it's just a quick time event. Sonic also doesn't control that well when you have control anyways, couple that with a jump that just feels kind of heavy. 2D sections suck with modern Sonic, and while yeah, he's not technically broken, he's completely void of any gameplay with actual substance. You just hold the boost button in some of these levels, and almost no input is required from you as the player. His controls also don't help with platforming, making boosting in a straight line all he can do comfortably anyways, further making controlling him feel like an unfun imitation of other boost titles. Seriously, I don't understand what went wrong here. You guys did just fine in Unleashed and Generations, why did the controls get fucked up too?
I've never played a Sonic game that felt so soulless, one-note, and empty. This game had me on autopilot the entire time, and that is not a good thing whatsoever.
Modern Sonic is the best part of the game, and I say that sadly since that means it's all downhill from here. I already touched on the Avatar, but here's praying the Avatar will never touch on me, because they frankly just suck. I don't even like the idea of this Avatar character to begin with. Rarely are these self-insert things ever written well in my eyes, and here that is no exception. Your character is basically non-verbal, and they're just a worse modern Sonic in every way. No spin jump makes enemies annoying sometimes, a weapon that just serves to jam wisps down your throat, and controls that just don't feel good at all. Why does it take so long to make this bastard of a bear slow down? He barely moves until he does, then it takes forever to get him to slow down, making control of the Avatar just feel extremely heavy and unfun. The Avatar's jump is also crazy heavy feeling. Oftentimes while playing Sonic Forces, either as modern Sonic or the Avatar character, I miss jumps I swear aren't that hard just because of how weirdly I feel they both control. It's hard to explain without actually having you play the game, but neither of these two are winning awards anytime soon. Sonic Forces also makes the Avatar characters and modern Sonic do this incredibly uninvolved double boost technique. They use it pretty sparingly at first, but then at the end of the game, they just spam this move over and over again. I don't know if this is supposed to be cool, but it just comes off as kind of corny and not in a fun way. Not to mention, the stupid theme that plays when you do this move, the Avatar just annoys me. It is quite literally just some giant joke to me since it plays like shit, looks like shit, and has absolutely zero personality. Sonic Forces also lets you unlock a ton of clothing options for your avatar by completing missions. As previously mentioned, being spammed by these along with all the dialogue really screwed the pace. Well, stages shower you in rings in this game for some reason, and without a life system, this would have been a perfect time to have an item shop where I can buy my own clothes with rings instead of being forced to watch a Hot Topic PowerPoint every time I finish a level. Sadly, you cannot buy clothing as they must all be earned. I'm not even at Classic Sonic yet, and nothing in this game is cohesive or created with any actual thought. There's no ideas in this game. Everything is a bland and hollow execution of a concept without any ideas present to actually make it fun. Nothing was made to actually execute an idea that the devs wanted to include. Everything just checks an arbitrary list to make an anniversary game, seeing as this was released for Sonic's 25th anniversary. Speaking of an anniversary game, let's finally get to Classic Sonic. Oh my god, Classic Sonic. What have they done to you, my boy? Where do I even begin? First of all, I must reiterate, why the fuck are you here? Second, as if Classic Sonic's inclusion didn't seem arbitrary enough, they gave him like 5 proper stages excluding bosses. Why have him at all if you're gonna make him this much of an afterthought? Third, the physics. Oh my god, the physics. Classic Sonic's air control is all sorts of wrong, and why are they so allergic to letting him roll down hills to pick up speed? It's like the most basic way to make Classic Sonic fans happy. He's got this drop dash from Mania, which is nice, because he can use it to drop dash the fuck out of here. Classic Sonic is arguably the lowest point in a game that scrapes the bottom of the barrel in its ability to provide engaging levels and meaningful ideas.
It's gotta be all good though. Sonic games usually have amazing music, right? Right?
Sonic Forces decided to forego that route and decided the music should match the game. Bland and forgettable. I'm not dissing on anyone here, and I'm no music aficionado, but all of his music just blends together to me. Also, Sonic is known for some pretty cheesy lyrics in his song, but Jesus Christ, the main theme to Forces, Fist Bump, is just awful to me. They spam this song during the entire game, and it's just such a step above some of the other songs in the series' discography in terms of cheesiness. I don't know. I love I Am All of Me from the Shadow the Hedgehog soundtrack, and so many cheesy songs like Free from Sonic Freeriders, but I just can't get behind Fist Bump. Especially the retro version that plays when Classic Sonic gets an invincibility monitor. The rest of the soundtrack is, as I mentioned, forgettable in my eyes. Just not my cup of tea, but not awful by any stretch. I'm sure there's stuff here that others can find enjoyment in. Normally when I play a game people dog on a lot, I ask myself if I had fun or if I felt playing it was a waste of time. I asked myself this when playing Sonic Lost World and said I didn't regret playing the game again. However, here with Sonic Forces, I absolutely regretted playing the game again. It was an unfun use of my time, and if I wasn't streaming it with viewers, I think the sheer monotony of the game would have turned me away from finishing it. Without any real ideas to make gameplay fun, interesting, or even remotely memorable, I think everyone is better off skipping this one. There's just nothing here.
Alright, so big shock. Sonic Forces doesn't really stick the landing it never really attempted to make. But how does it fare against its older, buggier brother, Sonic 06? Well, to find out, I had to play Sonic 06.
I last played Sonic 06 when I was about 20 to 21 years old, so about 3 years ago, but I was there for 06's launch at the ripe age of 5 years old. My dad picked out the game for us along with our PlayStation 3, and I loved it back then. Over the years, as I remained a Sonic fan, I eventually learned of the reputation this game had as I grew older. Sonic 06 was and still is a buggy mess, but I think we've long passed the days where bashing this game for clout was relevant. Seriously, people used to say this was one of the worst games of all time, ignoring all the worst titles that had come out before and after. However, I can't lie, some of the critiques weren't all wrong. For example, this game had its story bashed a ton and for good reason. It's a time travel story. Silver, aka Trunks from Dragon Ball Z, is a hedgehog from a ruined future who gets told if he travels back in time and puts Sonic on a t-shirt, he can prevent the destruction of the world at the hands of Iblis, one half of Solaris, the god the people of Soleanna pray to. Soleanna is where this game takes place, with Sonic running through as the people celebrate and pray to their god so that he doesn't torch them all. Eggman interrupts the ceremony to kidnap the princess, causing Sonic to spring into action, not knowing that Silver is on his tail. Lastly, there's Shadow, who's working for Gun in this game. Shadow's adventure has him mainly dealing with Mephiles, the other half of Solaris who wishes to rejoin himself with Iblis in order to become whole as Solaris once again. There's a ton more to the plot than what I just mentioned, like constant time travel, appearances from Sonic's friends, as well as the other hedgehogs crossing paths on more than one occasion. If I was to give a full plot summary, we'd be here all day, so let's continue. The story is a mess. Since it involves time travel, it runs into a lot of issues that come with those types of stories. For example, Rouge asks Omega to shut himself down for 200 years, so that way, in 200 years' time, he can reboot and assist Shadow after he doesn't use a portal to get back to the present. But that involves me believing that for 200 years, Nothing ever happened to Omega after the world quite literally ends. It also means that when Shadow travels back with Omega to the present, the actual Omega from the present should be on standby mode, waiting to power on in the distant future to help Shadow, meaning there should be 2 Omega in the world at any given moment, one from the current present and one from 200 years in the future who's still helping us out here in the present. Also, if these guys are time jumping with Chaos Emeralds, doesn't that mean there's now multiple of a Chaos Emerald in some of these timelines, like 2 blues or 2 greens? I could go on and on with things like this. The characters also act really strange in this game. Sometimes they're doing really cool things, like Amy stepping in front of Silver and saying absolutely not when he tries to kill Sonic, or Sonic and Shadow taunting each other not to be late. And sometimes they act like bumbling idiots. Later in Sonic and Silver's story, Eggman crashes the egg carrier with himself and Elise on it, killing them both. Sonic then travels back in time to board the egg carrier and save Elise before they crash. Well, this begs the question, why the hell would you let her board the aircraft in the first place if you knew it was going to crash? Why wouldn't you just time travel to before she boarded the stupid thing and rescue her before she gets on? And if that wasn't bad enough, Eggman suddenly whips out the Egg Wyvern, which he can clearly use to fly, after Sonic boards the carrier and confronts him during the malfunction. So then why would Eggman and Elise die when Sonic and Silver can't catch up to the egg carrier? He very clearly has methods to escape. It just makes no sense. It means that Eggman just accepted his fate and chose to go down with the carrier instead of flying out on the Egg Wyvern until he sees Sonic and then gains the will to live again. Listen, at the very least, even if the story isn't good, I still think there's some moments that are so bad they're funny. The aforementioned Eggman thing is pretty funny, but so is Sonic's dialogue in general with Elise. Multiple times in the story, something traumatic will happen, and Sonic will just tell Elise to smile or just go for a jog or something, but it comes off so hilariously aloof, it's amazing. No normal person would ever talk like this, even if they're trying to be an optimist. And yes, I am going to address the elephant in the room, Elise and Sonic kissing. Listen, I'm sure this fucked up a whole generation of kids, the consequences of which we will see for decades to come, but if you think of it this way, it's not that bad. She could have kissed Big the Cat instead.
I personally think it would have been more effective if Shadow and Silver made out with him. They could have taken turns or something, but what do I know?
Moving on from actual crimes, we have the all-important gameplay, and oh my god. You gotta pick from one of the 3 Hedgehog stories, and that decides all the gameplay you'll go through. Sonic's story has you play as Sonic, of course, but you also control Tails and Knuckles, as well as the other Hedgehogs from time to time. Shadow's story includes Rouge and Omega, and Silver's story includes Amy and Blaze the Cat for some reason. A viewer in my chat pointed out how hilarious it is that no one interacts with Blaze whatsoever other than Silver, and now I can't unnotice that, so thanks Insomniac. Sonic is what I would consider the best story by far. Sonic himself plays extremely similar to his adventure games, except he controls like crap, he feels so light and frail like any tap of the stick will send him flying, and he's not fast, just sensitive. He also can't jump out of a spin dash anymore, which is blasphemy to someone like me who loved shooting Sonic up slopes with spin dash jumps. Sonic also has access to these gems for his shoes, which give him different abilities. This is noteworthy for one reason. They didn't program the bar being used up, so he has unlimited use of these abilities. The purple gem is probably the only one I'd bother using, since it means you can jump infinitely and explore as much as you want. And don't think I forgot about the Mach speed sections. Listen, I get it, they're frustrating. Maybe it's just me, but I can get through them relatively easily, so it's not such a negative for me as it was in the past. They're cool set pieces with amazing music, so I actually don't hate them despite the fact they control like shit. If they just made them control half decent, I think they'd be really fun, but for now, they're just not the worst things ever to me. Knuckles and Tails being here sounds like fun until you realize they play like complete garbage, with Knuckles being a genuine chore to play anytime he's on screen. Tails has been neutered coming in from Sonic Adventure 1, and to top things off, he lost his Tailspin attack, forcing you to use his dummy Ring Bomb attack instead. This move sucks to use and makes combat with Tails unfun and clunky, and also shoots the frame rate in the head. Honestly, that's a great way to describe everyone who isn't Sonic in this game. Unfun and clunky. Sonic is clunky, but at least he's fun sometimes. I've seen people say Blaze is fun to play as, and sure, sometimes she is, but her attack method is just super weird and makes her unfun and cumbersome compared to Sonic in a game where he's already cumbersome. Moving on to Shadow's story, it is exhausting. Rouge constantly makes things a chore to play since her bomb attack controls pretty poorly, often requiring her to stay still to aim properly. Omega also has no range and pitiful damage on this charge attack, meaning you'll probably be blind firing this jump shot most of the time. And then Shadow. Oh man, Shadow. He's meant to be the more combat-oriented hedgehog of the three. What ends up happening is what might take Sonic a homing attack and a smack from the bounce bracelet takes Shadow like an entire combo and additional jump to do. It's even worse when you realize his only combo is just smashing the X button a ton until the enemy drops dead.
Shadow also has access to vehicles like he did in Shadow the Hedgehog, and wouldn't you know it, they control like shit here too.
Everyone in Shadow's story is just underwhelming to play, and couple that with the buggy nature of the game and the frame dips, and you'll genuinely be exhausted from the experience. It just drags on the entire time with almost no flow, especially because of the delay in between Shadow's homing attacks, unless you want him to just punch and kick the air like a moron. Last is Silver's story, and if Shadow's story is a bore that drags on, Silver's story is a frustrating reminder of everything wrong with this game. I don't even want you to remotely associate Silver and the word speed in your head, since it will never happen. For some reason, the game wants you to fight a ton of enemies as Silver, but all the frame dips combined with the generally shitty controls make Silver a frustratingly clunky and slow character. When he takes a hit, he gets knocked on his ass for like 40 years, and when the frame rate chugs during these moments, you'll feel the anger really kick in. Silver can pick things up with his psychic powers to chuck them back at the enemy, but it's not really that fun to do. Half the time, the collision doesn't work right, so the enemies don't take damage, and other times, Silver won't pick up the projectiles hurled at him. If you want to play a drinking game, how about you take a shot every time your thrown projectile bounces off another projectile you threw and completely misses your target?
Silver's levels kind of homogenize into these levels where I feel like I spent more time fighting with Silver's psychic powers than I did actually dealing with the level at hand.
It's even worse that his campaign has you playing as Amy, the single worst character in this whole game. Her hammer has like no range, her jump is slow, and her double jump shoots all her momentum in the head. She's completely unfun to play as, and you'll find yourself just wishing you were playing as Silver again, which is saying a lot. Silver's story also has you play as Blaze, which is fine as I mentioned. She's not as fun as Sonic once again since she can be clunkier, but she also barely takes up any time, so she's harmless. I couldn't tell if I disliked Shadow's story or Silver's more. They both kind of just drained me by the time I was done with them. Relieved is not what you should feel when you finish a game, and unfortunately, any satisfaction I could have felt was robbed from me. All I was left with was the relief that at least for the time being, my time with Shadow and Silver was finally over. I also wanted to touch on the boss fights in the game, some of which were downright bad. All the fights with Silver boil down to waiting for the opponent to do something and then smashing them with as many objects as you can. This, coupled with the sheer amount of times you have to redo certain boss fights, makes boss fights, in general, another strike against the game. The amount of times I had to either fight Silver or fight as Silver against the other hedgehogs was just plain repetitive and makes bosses feel more like padding than actual attempts to make engaging boss fights. After trudging through all three campaigns, we get to the final story segment. During the final story segment, Sonic gets impaled almost immediately by Mephiles, which puts a huge smile on my face. Yes! I'm very pleased with this.
Sonic.
No, don't help him. This makes Elise burst into tears. Wait a second, you're telling me you cried over a blue hedgehog you've known for like 2 days, but when you were 6 years old, you didn't cry at your dad dying? Anyway, this releases Iblis from Elise, allowing Mephiles to bond with it, turning them both into Solaris. Sonic's homies and Silver, for some reason, all then get teleported to the same spot where they see Sonic's corpse and decide to get the Chaos Emeralds to revive him after Elise said he's not completely dead. This leads to a pretty short segment where 7 of Sonic's homies grab the scattered Chaos Emeralds, leading to characters being in stages they didn't see in the 3 campaigns, like Knuckles going through the forest. Sonic is then brought back to life with the power of friendship, Chaos Emeralds, and criminal acts in 46 of 50 states. Sonic is revived in his super form and shares his energy with Silver and Shadow, only for some reason, causing them both to go super as well. The 3 of you then take on Solaris, and well, it's pretty lame. Unfortunately, this boss falls victim to being bad just like the others as well. Nothing is well explained, you're constantly spawning in areas where you take damage, the frame rate is constantly dying, and it's just unintuitive. At least his world's instrumental plays in the background, I guess.
And that's Sonic 06. Thank God it's finally over.
When playing Sonic 06, I found that I only really had fun with Sonic's parts of the game. Sure, the game played like ass and he controlled poorly, but the actual level design was damn solid. Wave Ocean, Kingdom Valley, and Crisis City were genuinely enjoyable stages. Kingdom Valley especially was so open with so many different routes to explore It was delightful to play through, even with everything holding it back. Sonic 06 has actual ideas, with stages that attempt to wow players with imaginative set pieces, and designs that make me understand why Project 06 made a bunch of people into 06 apologists. Knuckles and Tails didn't really bother me that much because the Sonic stages were good enough to me. But that's when the game nosedives. As mentioned, I didn't enjoy Silver or Shadow's campaigns, and a huge part of that is because of the game's bugginess and lack of polish. Loading screens on top of loading screens made the already clunky and slow parts of the game even worse. I genuinely tapped out a few times, needing to go out and get some air or go for a walk before the game drove me up the wall. I genuinely cannot express this enough. If you are one of the people that thinks Sonic 06 is a good game, but the last time you interacted with it was through Project 06, then you need to play the original release again. The state this game released in was and still is completely unacceptable, and genuinely destroys some of the good ideas this game had by making them so unfun to experience you might not even want to give them a second chance. Sonic 06 is not some unsung hero we were wrong about 18 years ago. It's a broken mess of a game with a confusing story, gameplay that genuinely drags on sometimes, and at worst is just frustratingly boring. I don't like this revisionist idea that this game was somehow good. Listen, it had and still has good ideas, but what good are those ideas if the entire package surrounding it is coated in bullshit?
If you enjoy this game in its entirety, then good for you. I'm happy you see something I don't see, but objectively, this game is buggy, unfinished, and a complete mess.
With that being said though, I want to touch on what I didn't completely hate. I actually like the look of the levels here. Wave Ocean and Kingdom Valley look great, for example. Remove the creepy humans and you have a genuinely nice world for Sonic and friends to run around in. The level design is also actually really good, as previously mentioned. Plenty of branching paths and goodies if you explore. The levels have flow, and that flow isn't really interrupted by the levels having poor design, rather, they get interrupted from everything else surrounding them, like the frame rate. But I feel like when the game isn't getting in the way, the actual levels themselves are really well done. I also want to talk about the music in this game. Holy shit, the music. It's phenomenal. Wave Ocean, Crisis City, Soliana's overworld theme. It's all so good. His world can be corny sometimes with its lyricism, but I still like the song a lot, which is more than I can say for Fist Bump. If you haven't, please give the soundtrack a listen. It's unfortunately definitively the best part of this release. I also really like some of the character models, especially Knuckles and Sonic. I love how long Sonic's quills are in this game. They work so well in my opinion and make him look far cooler than I think he's ever looked since. Do I like Sonic 06? No, not at all. I like some parts of Sonic's story, and that's about it. But the game as a whole is nothing I'd recommend to anyone in this state. Now then, which game do I think is worse? Sonic Forces or Sonic 06? Well, the answer to that is Sonic Forces. As a baseline, I barely had any fun playing Sonic Forces, but Sonic 06 made me have fun here and there. From that alone, I think it wins, but I want to explain a little bit more. I don't like either of these titles, but Sonic Forces just fails to be anything to me. It's so bland and genuinely lacks anything of substance. Sonic 06 is a mess and a failure as well, but it has good ideas that are simply delivered in arguably the worst way possible. Sonic 06 still had moments I thought were cool and that wowed me conceptually, like the split water Mach speed section. Sonic Forces just made me roll my eyes every 5 minutes and made me dread ever touching the Avatar character again. Sonic Forces isn't the worst game of all time by any stretch of the imagination, but I think its absolute lack of quality, care, or any real meaningful gameplay/stage ideas makes it one of the most boring games I've ever played in my entire life. Sonic Forces barely has a story after the first few moments, meanwhile Sonic 06 has arguably one of the worst and most confusing stories in a Sonic game, with some cool moments peppered in sparingly. Those tiny cool moments here and there give 06 so much more life and personality compared to Forces, it's insane. Forces is so dry and the script sucks balls, but there's no cool moments to make up for it. At least 06 has 3 drippy hedgehogs after this shit happened. The level design in Sonic 06 shows creativity and makes me wonder about what it would be like to see Sonic and his friends navigate this world fluidly instead of within the confines of base 06. Sonic Forces levels make me want to roll my eyes at bland levels that are so short with such little substance that they all blend together. I don't care if Sonic controlled perfectly, that wouldn't make any of the stages in Forces fun or appealing. I can laugh at the bad parts of 06, rage at the frustrating parts, and enjoy the good parts because there's actually something here. Sonic Forces is just a heartless piece of software with the titular blue rat. This also makes me wonder why the hell we spent about a decade saying Sonic 06 is one of the worst games of all time. Listen, 06 is one of the buggiest commercial releases from a big company, that's for sure. But in a day and age where some games launch in worse states than 06, I think it's time we genuinely stop with these hyperbolic labels we give games. Sonic Forces is horrible, but I can think of a ton of games worse than it, and Forces in itself is worse than Sonic 06 in my opinion, so I don't think either of these titles get close to worst game ever. In conclusion, neither game is worth your time, to be honest. You're better off just playing Project 06 and pretending like Forces never happened. Both games are just too flawed to recommend to anyone. But if I had to pick which pile of shit smells the worst, I'd have to go with Sonic Forces. Thank you so much to everyone who stuck around for the video and came by the live streams. You guys are amazing. If you guys want to be part of the recording of these videos, make sure to stop on by when I go live right here on YouTube. And I'll see you guys next time where I figure out how many copies of Sonic Advance you can eat before you die. Later!